Welcome to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case.
And I'm Renata Kiss.
And tonight, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris prepare for their first debate.
Meanwhile, Harris releases her official policy agenda.
And the DOJ thwarts an assassination plot in the U.S. All right, well, tonight could be a major turning point in the presidential election as both Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump square off in Philadelphia for their first and possibly only debate. Harris has a lot at stake tonight as she has largely shied away from unscripted events, making tonight one of the few times she'll have to defend her record on the spot. According to insiders, Trump's game plan is to tie Harris to Joe Biden's unpopular record, while at the same time highlighting her history of promoting left-wing policy. GOP strategist Tricia McLaughlin says Trump has the advantage on the policy tonight, but does warn that things could go off the rails if Harris gets under his skin.
On almost every issue, Donald Trump wins with double digits, from the economy, inflation, immigration, foreign policy. But she's very much going to set landmines as far as these character assassinations, these personal attacks. When he starts feeling like he's backed up against a wall, he really starts punching, and that can lead for him to get in some unnecessary territory.
And reports suggest that Harris plans to do just that by bringing up his various legal troubles. According to ABC News, Florida Representative Matt Gaetz has been preparing Trump for these kinds of attacks by, quote, firing questions at Trump around some of the more challenging issues he faces, such as his legal troubles, including his federal indictments on election interference, as well as retaining classified documents. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris appears to have taken a rather important talking point away from Donald Trump by finally posting a policy agenda on her website, but that could open her up to some new attacks. FISM's Ian Patrick has more.
One could argue that the Harris Waltz campaign is closely adhering to the phrase, "it's never too late." On Sunday, the campaign finally unveiled its full policy list just 2 days before Harris was set to debate former President Donald Trump. Harris's list, titled A New Way Forward, is billed as a package on which all Americans could agree. The main points of focus include the economy and taxation, abortion, the border crisis, gun control, and upholding American interests abroad. On the economy, Harris borrows a line which President Biden used much throughout his presidency, which is that her goal is, quote, building up the middle class. This includes things like tax cuts and securing policies like Social Security and Medicare. One of her more notable goals is to provide monetary incentives with tax credits for families with children and for earned income. She also aims to provide first-time home buyers with up to $25,000 to help with down payments. Other outlined policies tend to be more in line with the progressive Democrat way of thinking. For example, on abortion, Harris looks to cement Roe v. Wade as the law of the land and to guarantee federally protected abortions nationwide. Regarding gun control, Harris aims to, quote, ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. But oddly enough, many of her policies tend to paint her as just more of a contrast to Donald Trump. For example, in every major subject for policy outlines, the Harris campaign includes what it calls Trump's Project 2025 agenda. These write-ups are meant to try and tie Trump with the Heritage Project's 2025 agenda, from which the Trump campaign has consistently distanced itself. In addition, some believe that Harris is not being completely forthwith about her entire policy approach, specifically that she's hiding some of her more progressive stances to win over more moderate voters. That allegation received some attention this week when independent Senator Bernie Sanders suggested that Harris is doing what she thinks is right in order to win the election.
You have described Vice President Kamala Harris as a progressive. She has previously supported Medicare for all. Now she does not. She's previously supported a ban on fracking. Now she does not. These, Senator, are ideas that you have campaigned on. Do you think that she is abandoning her progressive ideals?
No, I don't think she's abandoning her ideals. I think she's trying to be pragmatic and doing what she thinks is right in order to win the election. Her views are not mine, but I do consider her progressive.
A Fox News digital report says the Harris campaign confirmed that she has changed some of her key policies in an effort to take a more pragmatic approach, as they described it. But it begs the question about whether or not this supposed tactic will play well with voters, especially if her core values are different from what is being presented. This is Ian Patrick reporting for FISM News.
Thanks for that report, Ian. Well, speaking of Harris's first debate, a Muslim American group is already pressuring the vice president to side with Palestine ahead of the only debate Harris agreed to do. Tonight's debate will present Harris with the option to no longer side with Israel, and this would be a break from both Biden and Trump on the issue. However, Harris has not indicated she would do so. Engage Action, a Muslim American activist group, has told Newsweek that the vice president needs to demonstrate a clear understanding of the violence in Gaza and offer real policy solutions to win the Muslim American vote. The group especially wants Harris to negotiate a ceasefire in Gaza and call an end to the bloodshed in the territory. The group acknowledged that while a complete departure from current policy may not be likely, the vice president still has a chance to offer a more nuanced stance that could resonate with voters, particularly among the pro-Palestinian movements and the broader Muslim and Arab American communities.
And shifting our attention now to D.C., where Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is slamming Republican efforts to attach an election integrity measure to a government spending bill, calling it an absolute waste of time.
Last week, House Republicans released, without even consulting the Democratic leaders of the House and Senate or the president, a 6-month CR that is transparently unserious and seemingly designed for scoring political points instead of avoiding a shutdown. In fact, Madam President, it is so unserious that the White House has already issued a veto threat.
Schumer said that the so-called SAVE Act, which would require proof of citizenship in order to vote in U.S. elections, is an example of Republican quote-unquote extremism, saying, quote, "We will not let poison pills or Republican extremism put funding for critical programs at risk." This comes as Congress has until September 30th to approve a stopgap spending bill and avoid a government shutdown.
And earlier today, Congress awarded its greatest honor, Congressional Gold Medals, to the 13 U.S. service members who were killed in the 2021 Afghanistan withdrawal. It comes on the heels of another scathing report by House Republicans that blames the Biden administration for their deaths in Kabul. The White House dismissed the report yesterday as partisan and inaccurate. White House spokesman John Kirby said that it was Trump's Doha agreement with Afghanistan that resulted in the release of 5,000 Taliban prisoners and its tragic aftermath.
As General Frank McKenzie, former commander of U.S. Central Command, said himself in testimony, the Doha deal had a, quote, really pernicious effect, unquote, on the Afghan government and military. As we saw, it demoralized them and it disenfranchised them. They knew right then and there that America was on its way out.
Kirby added that the Biden administration worked with the consequences the Trump administration left behind.
President Biden, for his part, faced a stark choice when he came to office. Abide by the flawed agreement and end America's longest war, or blow up the deal, extend the war, and see a much smaller contingent of American troops back in combat with the Taliban. He chose the former, and he was able to buy additional time to prepare for that withdrawal all the way into the summer. And we as a nation are safer for it.
However, it's worth noting that the Doha agreement, though considered weak, was supposed to be a gradual withdrawal from Afghanistan instead of a rushed endeavor. Conservatives have argued, based on their investigations, that the Biden administration ignored the conditions in the Doha agreement, pleas of the Afghan government, and the objections by our NATO allies, deciding to unilaterally withdraw from the country.
And I'm sure that that's certainly going to be a topic tonight at the debate. Kamala Harris famously said she's the last person in the room with President Biden when he made the decision to withdraw from Afghanistan. So I'm sure Trump will bring that up. Meanwhile, up next, the DOJ charges 2 would-be assassins here in the U.S. We'll get the details on that story and so much more after this short break. We'll be right back.
There are moments in life that define us. Choices determine the courses we take. choices that create life, or those that save a life. And some make life worthwhile. There are decisions to stay or to go, to remain the same or to grow. Sometimes we pray and make peace. Other times we take a stand for what we believe. In celebration, mourning, triumph, and defeat, we are invested in every decision we seek. Despite differences, we have one thing in common: the desire to do all for the glory of God. Keep your wallet aligned with your heart and your investments in harmony with your faith. Timothy Plan, biblically responsible mutual funds, ETFs, and retirement plans. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing.
Emmy was in a bad relationship when she found out she was pregnant. Her boyfriend told her to get an abortion, which she seriously considered. Now, Emmy knew that if she got an abortion, a part of her would be broken. So Emmy went to a preborn center in need of guidance. They were able to put every fear at ease and let her know it was going to be okay. And because of preborn, Emmy's little boy is here. She couldn't imagine life without him. Preborn clinics introduce moms in crisis to their babies through ultrasound while providing hope, love, and the gospel in action. Would you join Preborn in helping more moms choose life? For $140, you can sponsor 5 ultrasounds and help rescue 5 babies from abortion. To donate, dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. That's pound 250 keyword baby, or donate securely at preborn.com. That's preborn.com.
Welcome back to FISM News. I'm Renata Kiss. Well, let's continue with some rather disturbing news. The DOJ arrested 2 American men who were the alleged leaders of a transnational terrorist group. According to a press release from the DOJ, Matthew Allison from Idaho and Dallas Humber from California were charged with soliciting hate crimes, soliciting the murder of federal officials, and conspiring to provide material support to terrorists. AG Merrick Garland announced that the 2 men who targeted non-white populations and gay individuals did all of this in the name of violent white supremacist ideology. The Terrorgram Collective, as they are known, plotted their crimes in the social media platform Telegram to carry out heinous crimes against government officials and aid international terrorist activities. FBI Director Chris Wray said, quote, "Whether motivated by racial bias or antagonism toward government and societal norms, such behavior will not be tolerated." The 2 men were indicted on 15 counts, which could result in a total of 220 years in prison.
Truly troubling news indeed. Meanwhile, shifting our attention overseas, where we're now learning that Ukraine launched more than 140 drones last night, targeting multiple Russian regions, including the capital city of Moscow. It's now the 2nd largest drone strike on Russian soil to date in the war, and follows an increase in Ukraine's domestic drone production. Russian officials say that the attack killed 1 woman and injured 8 others. The Russian government has announced a criminal investigation into what it's now calling a terror attack in these strikes. Ukraine, meanwhile, says they shot down 46 Iranian-made drones and 2 Russian missiles on the same exact night.
At the same time, a Syrian health minister claimed yesterday that Israeli airstrikes killed 18 people on Sunday and wounded dozens of others. It's the deadliest Israeli attack against its neighbor since the war started in Gaza. Syrian officials report that a weapons research facility was targeted along with civilian sites. Israel has been silent on the nature of its strike, but has conducted dozens of airstrikes in Syria since October 7th. In that time, they've killed over 200 Iranian-backed fighters, according to a British-based war monitor.
Meanwhile, Iran is once again renewing its threats against Israel, vowing now to carry out what it's calling a nightmare attack following the killing of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in late July. The commander of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said yesterday the attack is inevitable, saying that it will also be, quote, painful and different from what you expected. Iran has said the attack will be precise and calculated in nature, but has given no details about the exact nature of what this attack will actually be when it happens. However, American officials do suggest Iran may hold off on attacking Israel for now in order to allow for continued negotiations for a ceasefire deal in Gaza.
Meanwhile, Palestine is also trying to assert dominance over Israel. The AP obtained a Palestinian UN proposal draft demanding Israel to give up its unlawful presence in Gaza and the West Bank within the next 6 months. The General Assembly resolution stems from an International Court of Justice ruling in July that called Israel's presence in Palestinian territory unlawful. Israeli ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, denounced the resolution, saying it's a reward for terrorism, and called on the assembly to reject the proposal. He added, quote, "Let it be clear, nothing will stop Israel or deter it from its mission to bring home the hostages and eliminate Hamas." Now, should the resolution be adopted, it would not be legally binding. However, it would send a political message. A council diplomat says that Palestinians are bringing the issue to the forefront before world leaders of the General Assembly start their annual meetings on September 22nd.
And at the same time, Israel's hostage representative warned on Sunday that protests against Israel and Netanyahu are actually helping Hamas. Former IDF General Gal Hirsch denounced reports that Israel has stalled negotiations for a deal as a lie and is instead accusing Hamas of wanting to create division inside Israel, specifically on the issue of the October 7th hostages. At the same time, he also called out the United States and other allied nations for pressuring Israel to end the war, pointing to both the domestic protests at home in Israel as well as international pressure as reasons why Hamas is, quote, in no hurry to seal a deal. All right, with that, we have plenty more news coming up next. But first, let's go back in time with Seth Udinsky for a moment in history.
Welcome back to A Moment in History. I'm Seth Udinsky. Well, the Western Hemisphere was in many ways kind of the last frontier of exploration during the end of the medieval world and then into the age of exploration in the 1500s. Now, of course, for many, the Western Hemisphere at that time, as we understand it, was not even a thing, since most of the people at that time were of the belief that the nearest landmass to the Atlantic coast of Europe was the Pacific coast of Asia. But when Christopher Columbus and many European explorers who followed him discovered a whole new continent between Western Europe and East Asia, they also discovered many ancient pagan tribes. One of these tribes, perhaps the most famous of pre-European America, was the dominant force in Central America, a mighty state that propagated the worship of a pantheon of gods and often partook in the egregious act of child sacrifice. These were the Aztecs. Now, the Aztecs had likely been a dominant force in the High Middle Ages in Mesoamerica, but their early history is really lost to us. We get a much clearer picture of their history in the year 1328 when the capital city of Tenochtitlan was founded, which stood where the current capital of Mexico, that's Mexico City, now stands today. For the next 200 years, the empire absorbed other neighboring tribes and grew to encompass several million people, with roughly 140,000 people living in its capital city at its height. Now, the Aztecs worshipped a plethora of pagan demon gods, as we said earlier, and core to their religious practices was the profane ritual of human sacrifices, where the Aztecs would seek to appease these gods by cutting the hearts out of their victims. Sometimes this would be children, keep in mind, and spilling the blood on the ritual altar. Now, unbeknownst to the Aztecs and their famed Emperor Montezuma, a band of explorers from across the sea to the east, the Spanish conquistadors, were on their way. In 1519, the Christian conquistadors, led by the Spanish warlord Hernán Cortés, waged war on the pagans. With an army of only a few hundred men up against several 100,000 Aztec warriors, Cortés and the Spaniards nonetheless still conquered the Aztecs with the help of several key allies. Now, the first ally was weaponry. The Spanish explorers, who were trained military knights as they were, also had the distinct advantage of iron swords, strong plate armor, and perhaps most important, the newly invented muskets and cannons at their disposal, while the Aztecs were very much an ancient military force, using the bow and arrow and the spear with limited protection on their bodies. Now, the second was disease, particularly smallpox. The Spaniards were largely immune to the sicknesses of Europe, while the Aztecs were not. Thousands of Aztecs were obliterated by diseases that barely harmed the conquistadors, if at all. And finally, the third ally came in the form of other tribes. The Spaniards were able to rally neighboring tribes who hated the Aztecs against the Aztecs, giving Cortez and his men a key assist on unfriendly turf. The Spaniards obliterated the Aztecs and set up a key point of the Spanish New World Empire, which would last for the next few hundred years. Thanks so much for joining me once again for a moment in history.
Do you want to invest in biblically responsible stocks? Financial Issues can help. For only $132 per year, our team of experts will help you make wise decisions with your money and guide you to successful investments that will not dishonor God. You'll also have access to our portfolio tracker tool, which will help you keep an eye on your asset allocations, and our buys and sells page, which will give you valuable information about biblically responsible stocks. Being a Financial Issues partner is the best way to invest in accordance with biblical values. Make the most of your money by becoming a partner today. Sign up at financialissues.org. That's financialissues.org.
When I took the test, I knew that I had other options. I was really scared. I know that it's really easy to get an abortion in New York. I've been down the other road before, and it really was a negative experience for me. And it felt like I did it because it made things easier for my partner at the time. And this time I thought, I think I want a different story. I'm just really scared. And she said, we'll take it a page at a time. It felt scary, but it felt like a good thing. I'm gonna have to, if I have this baby, I'm gonna have to do it alone, and that's gonna be really challenging. But I wanted to do it. But I knew that I needed help, and to get around people that would help me, not people who would say, this is a problem that we can make go away. More like, this is awesome and we can help you make it more awesome.
And welcome back to FISM News. Once again, I'm Renata Kiss. Well, let's continue with some national news. A Brown University trustee is stepping down after the school has decided to vote on Israeli divestment. Joseph Edelman, who has been a trustee since 2019, said it's the school's weakness towards student activists that led to the vote in the first place. Brown University argued that Edelman has a fundamental misunderstanding of the decisions that led to the institution to hold a vote on divestment, though details of the misunderstanding are unknown. In a letter published by the Wall Street Journal, Edelman concluded, quote, I consider the willingness to hold this vote a stunning failure of moral leadership at Brown University. I am unwilling to lend my name or give my time to a body that lacks basic moral judgment. According to the Daily Caller, Brown University is one of 3 elite universities that received substantial funding from Palestinian donors between 2017 and 2023.
And keeping with the topic of higher education today, although different from the situation with Israel and the campus protests, a new report shows that many of America's top universities are failing the free speech test. According to new rankings released by the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, or FIRE, a free speech watchdog group, Harvard and Columbia come in dead last with a free speech score of 0. That's based on the rankings of 58,000 students at over 250 colleges and universities across the country. Harvard and Columbia also had poor scores as well in regards to the, quote, strengths of students' favoritism when it comes to allowing liberal or conservative speakers on campus. That's alongside New York University, the University of Pennsylvania, and Bernard College as well. Meanwhile, the University of Virginia, that school came in first place for free speech this year.
Elsewhere, New York City is urging Governor Hochul to temporarily waive the city's sanctuary city laws amid growing concerns of terrorist threats. The Common Sense Caucus wrote last week that New York City is a prime target for terrorism, and we cannot afford to be complacent in the face of such threats. The coalition argued that sanctuary city laws prevent ICE from fully cooperating with local law enforcement, which severely hampers efforts to keep residents safe. The officials demanded immediate action to address the rising rate of violent crime in places such as Central Park and Queens Parks. The groups also highlighted arrests in New York, Los Angeles, and Philadelphia related to ISIS activity, saying these are all reasons for increased vigilance. While Hochul can lift sanctuary city laws through executive action, a permanent law banning the policy can only be voted on by the city council, which is currently dominated by left-wing members.
Elsewhere, shifting gears a little bit to a weather update where extreme heat and multiple wildfires are triggering mass evacuations in California and Nevada. Tens of thousands of people are under orders to leave ahead of the rapidly moving fires, which are largely uncontained as of this morning. Governors Gavin Newsom and Joe Lombardo declared emergencies for the fires on Saturday for the affected areas. By the way, those fires also come at the same time as extreme heat advisories. The smoke is also projected to settle across the Los Angeles basin, creating a separate health hazard on top of the fires and the heat.
And lastly, legendary actor and performer James Earl Jones passed away yesterday morning at his New York home at the age of 93. His successful career spans 7 decades with appearances from the stage to the silver screen. Of course, he also brought well-known characters like Star Wars' Darth Vader and The Lion King's Mufasa to life. But the actor, best known for his distinguished voice, had to first overcome a pronounced stutter that began as a child and lingered through his teenage years. His stammer was finally cured after his high school English teacher encouraged him to read his poetry out loud to the class. Jones began acting while in college and quickly gained notoriety.
You know, here on FISM News, it's not too often that we cover when someone famous passes away, especially when it's a cultural figure like this. But I think someone as legendary as James Earl Jones, we just had to cover. And I'm glad you mentioned what you did about the stutter as well. That's a very encouraging note to know that someone like him, that most iconic voice of all, came over those adversities.
Yes, and delivered great art.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, all our childhood's affected by Star Wars and The Lion King.
Absolutely.
So truly incredible.
All right, well, that's our program for today. Thank you so much for joining us. And please visit FISMnews.tv for more content.
That's right, FISMnews.tv. You can also watch the full show again on our website. By the way, for any other updates until our next show tomorrow night, you can also check us out on social media as well. Just type in FISM News on your favorite platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, you name it. I'm sure I'm forgetting a couple, but we're probably on there too. Rumble, I think. You can also download the FISM app right to your smartphone so you can take the news wherever you go. Thanks so much. God bless, and we'll see you tomorrow night with much more news coverage. See you then.